My Weird School Daze, Book number 11. Mr. Tony is full of baloney. Written by Dan Gutman. Pictures by Jim Palott. Chapter 7. My Genius Idea. My mom told me that our catering company wasn't doing very well. The 6 moms still didn't have any customers, and nobody wanted to buy their fancy sandwiches. Mom said it was because of the economy, whatever that means. But the food drive at school was going great. Morning, there was more food in the cardboard boxes by the front office. And then, finally, one morning, we saw a big sign on the wall. We did it! We collected 3,000 pounds of food. Great job, elementary school students. At lunchtime, I sat in the vomitorium with the guys. Andrea and her girly friends sat at the next table so they could annoy us. Me and Michael had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that weren't fancy at all. Ryan and Neil, the nude kid, bought the school lunch. Ugh, disgusting. When is Mr. Klutz going to jump out of a plane in an ape suit? Asked Neil the nude kid. I hope he does it when we're at ASKK, said Michael. Hey, do you think Mr. Tony will pogo juggle or rag jog today? Asked Ryan. Who knows, said Neil. He sure is a weird guy. Maybe Mr. Tony isn't the real ASKK director at all, I told the guys. Did you ever think of that? What do you mean, AJ? Asked Michael. Well, maybe Mr. Tony is an evil genius who wants to take over the world, I said. Maybe he kidnapped our real ASKK director and has him tied up to some railroad tracks. Stuff like that happens all the time, you know. At the next table, Andrea looked all worried. What's the matter? I asked her. Are you afraid that a real ASKK director is tied to the railroad tracks? No, Arlo, Andrea said. I'm worried about Mr. Tony. What about him? I asked. My mother is a psychologist, she said. She told me that some people are so desperate to be famous that they'll do just about anything to draw attention to themselves and make people like them. Like those parents who said their son was up in a hot air balloon last year, and those 2 people who crashed a party at the White House. Tony is crazy? I asked. No, Andrea said, but it's sad that he thinks he has to do such crazy things so people will like him. My mom thinks that's why he's addicted to cigarettes too. I know how to solve this problem, I said. How? Asked Emily. It's simple, I told them. We just need to make Mr. Tony famous. And how are we going to do that, Arlo? Andrea asked. We all thought and thought and thought for 1,100,000 seconds. That's when I came up with the greatest idea in the history of the world. It was like a light bulb appeared over my head. Mr. Tony is great at making pizza, right? I asked. Right, everybody replied. Well, I said, what if he made the biggest pizza in the world? That would make him famous. Maybe he would get into the Guinness Book of World Records. And if your mom is right, maybe Mr. Tony would stop smoking too. That just might work, Carlo, Andrea said. AJ, you're a genius, said Michael. I should get the Nobel Prize for that idea. That's a prize they give out to people who don't have bells. Chapter 8. The biggest pizza in the world. Instead of going out for recess, we all rushed over to the school library. Our media specialist, Mrs. Rupee, was in there reading her lunch. To what do I owe the pleasure of your company? She asked. That's grown-up talk for what are you doing here? We need to see the Guinness Book of World Records right away, I told her. I was all out of breath. Mrs. Rupee put her hand on my forehead. AJ, are you feeling okay? She asked. I've never heard you say you wanted to read a book before. Maybe I should call an ambulance and get you to the hospital. He's fine, said Neil the nude kid. We need to do some research, Mrs. Rupee, said Andrea. We want to find out how big the biggest pizza in the world is. Mrs. Rupee got the Guinness Book of World Records off a shelf, and we all gathered around her to look at it. Let's see, she said, leafing through the book. Here's a man who balanced a refrigerator on his teeth for 10 seconds. That's remarkable. And here's a man who ate a whole bicycle. That's amazing. Nothing about giant pizzas in there? Asked Ryan. Finally, Mrs. Rupee found the section on food, and there it was. The biggest pizza in the world was made in South Africa in 1990. It was 386 feet around, and it had 1,764 pounds of cheese and 1,985 pounds of tomato sauce on it. Wow, Michael said, which is Mom upside down. That's a big pizza. How can we possibly make a pizza bigger than that one? Asked Ryan. That's when I came up with the greatest idea in the history of the world. Our school collected over 3,000 pounds of food, I said. We could use the food from the food drive to make our pizza. The food we collected is for hungry people, AJ, Mrs. Rupee said. It would be wrong to use that food just to break a world record. Nobody puts beans or soup on pizza anyway, said Ryan. Okay, so maybe my idea wasn't so great after all. We all thought and thought and thought. I thought so hard that I thought my head was going to explode. Suddenly, Andrea got this gleam in her eye. I know, she said. The 6 moms can supply the ingredients for our pizza. Our school could be the first customer of our mom's new catering company. Yeah, said Emily. who always agrees with everything Andrea says. It was a good idea, I had to admit, but there wasn't any light bulb over Andrea's head, and I wasn't about to admit out loud that she had a good idea. That's the dumbest idea in the history of the world, I said. Chapter 9. The greatest day of my life. I love it, Mr. Tony said when we told him about our idea. Why didn't I think of making the biggest pizza in the world? That will be a lot easier than pogo juggling and egg jogging. Everybody was excited about getting into the Guinness Book of World Records, but little Miss Perfect had on her worried face. "What's the matter, Andrea?" asked Mr. Tony. "How will we put the pizza in an oven?" she asked. "To make the biggest pizza in the world, don't we need the biggest oven in the world?" "Andrea's right," said Emily, who always thinks Andrea is right. "No problem," said Mr. Tony. "I'll take care of that. We'll heat up the tomato sauce and cheese first and then spread them on the pizza crust. We'll have to make the pizza out in the playground because it will be too big to fit in here." "But there's another problem," Andrea said. "What will we do with the pizza after we make it? We can't eat a pizza that big, and it would be terrible to throw it away, especially after our food drive. What a waste of food!" "I know! We can give the pizza to a food bank so they can feed hungry people," I suggested. "AJ, you're a genius," Michael said. "No wonder I'm in the gifted and talented program." Everything was falling into place. Mom said that the 6 moms would be happy to supply the ingredients for our giant pizza. Ms. LaGrange, our lunch lady, said she would help us heat up the sauce in the kitchen and put the pizza together. Mr. Tony called the Guinness Book of World Records people, and they said they would send someone over to see our pizza in person and prove it was the biggest one in the world. "Let's not tell anyone else about our giant pizza," Mr. Tony told us. "Not even Mr. Klutz. If the word gets out that we're making the biggest pizza in the world, somebody might try to steal our idea and make a bigger pizza than ours." My lips were sealed, but not with glue or anything. That would be weird. Finally, the day came to put together our giant pizza. During recess, 3 huge trucks drove up onto the playground. One had a ton of cheese in it, one had a ton of tomato sauce in it, and one had a huge pizza crust. Guys wearing overalls got out of the trucks and started unloading all the stuff. "How did the 6 moms get a truck full of tomato sauce?" I asked my mom. "We went to rent a truck full of tomato sauce," she said. "You can rent anything." Everybody pitched in to help. Ms. Hannah, our art teacher, put gigantic pieces of cardboard down on the playground. We all unrolled the giant pizza crust onto the cardboard. It was the size of a swimming pool. Then Mr. Tony came out of the school. He was carrying this thing that looked like a big super soaker. There was a tank strapped to his back, like the kind scuba divers wear. "What's that thing?" Ryan asked. "It's a flamethrower," said Mr. Tony. "What does it do?" asked Michael. "It throws flame," said Mr. Tony. "So it has the perfect name," I said. Mr. Tony pulled the trigger on the flamethrower, and a giant explosion of fire came flying out. We all jumped back. I could feel the heat on my face. Mr. Tony walked all around the pizza crust, shooting fire all over it. "That thing is cool," we all said. "Where did you get a flamethrower?" Neil the nude kid asked Mr. Tony. "From Rent a Flamethrower," he replied. "You can rent anything." After a few minutes of flamethrowing, the giant pizza crust had turned from white to brown. "Okay," Mr. Tony said as he turned off the flamethrower. "It's cooked. Pour on the sauce." The truck, full of tomato sauce, backed up to the pizza and dumped its load onto the crust. The 6 moms used rakes and shovels to spread the sauce evenly. "Bring on the cheese," shouted Mr. Tony. The 6 moms shoveled cheese off the truck and carried it over to the pizza. "This is so exciting," Ryan's mom said as she scattered shovelfuls of cheese on top of the sauce. "Our first catering job." "What a way to start our new company," said Michael's mom. "This is much more fun than making little sandwiches," said Emily's mom. "And now for the toppings," my mom said, taking a bucket out of her car. "Pepperoni, salami, bologna, pastrami." "Mom," I complained, "pizza doesn't have lunch meat on it." "It's a fancy pizza," Mom told me as she flung the slices of meat on top like little frisbees. "Go ahead," Mr. Tony said. "You can put anything on a pizza." Finally, after 1,100,000 hours, the pizza was finished. We all stepped back to look at our masterpiece. We did it! We made the biggest pizza in the world. Everybody in school came out into the playground to see what all the excitement was about. The teachers were taking pictures with cell phone cameras. "I'm going to put this up on the school website," said Mrs. Yonkers, our computer teacher. "I'm going to write a children's book about it," said Mr. Mackey, our reading specialist. "What a mess I will have to clean up," said Miss Lazard, our custodian. "Where's Mr. Klutz?" asked Andrea. "He should be here to see this." "Mr. Klutz told me he had to go to a meeting," said Mrs. Patty, the school secretary. "He'll be back soon." Mr. Tony's cell phone rang. He answered it and spoke to somebody. It was a guy from the Guinness Book of World Records, he told us excitedly after he hung up. A lady will be here in a few minutes to measure our pizza and prove we broke the record. She came all the way from England. Channel 7 News called too, Mrs. Patty said. They're coming over to cover the story. Our pizza is going to be on TV. Everybody was freaking out with excitement. Mr. Tony was going to be famous, and it was all because of my genius idea. It was the greatest day of my life. That's when the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. But I'm not going to tell you what it was. Okay, I'll tell you. But you have to read the next chapter. So na boo boo on you.